I want to start by asking you all a question, but not for you to answer out loud. Consider it a game, just between you and me. Now, forget the crowd, just for a second, and pretend we've just met. And of course, I ask you the most obvious question. Hi, who are you? But now there's a catch. You can't say your name, can't say where you're from, forget what you're studying, or any other one of those facts right now. All the standard labels are off the table. I'm not asking what you're called, or what you do. I'm asking, at your absolute core, who are you? Now, what's probably happening is you're trying to find an internal answer that probably relates to the usual script. Something like, I'm a creator, or I'm a listener, or I really love my dog. But if you're anything like me, there's probably a more quiet internal thought in the back of your head right now. That's cool, but what else? Is that all I really am? That is the question I want to talk about today. You see, I think most of us go through life on the quiet assumption that we know quite accurately just exactly who we are. And let's make it clear, I'm not talking about a full-blown identity crisis. No, rather I'm talking about the fact that we take this oversimplified story of just exactly who we are and we present it to the world, the one with the safest labels, the one with the most rehearsed narrative, and we present that as fact. So much to the point that even we start to believe that is exactly who we are. And why would we ever think for a second that that might be a problem? In 2016, at the age of just 13, I found out about the sudden passing of a very close friend. It was my first taste of grief, and quite frankly, the feeling was incomprehensible. I thought I was handling it, and I was doing anything but that. Soon enough, I found myself in isolation. Not in the literal sense, but I started to prefer it that way. I distanced myself from friends. I pushed myself away from family. And soon enough, I was alone. I thought that the only thing that I could do to make myself feel better was to push myself away from connection. Fast forward to 9th grade, and I found myself in a hospital bed, surrounded by voices and faces that are still a blur to my own memory. I had neglected my health to such a point that I found myself hospitalized for 2 weeks in and out of consciousness after having to go through an emergency surgery. After being discharged, the thought you'd think out of such an experience is that you would have a newfound appreciation for life, but it was anything like that. I felt this overwhelming burden that I was suddenly behind, and I had so many things that I needed to catch up on. Because you can work on these things later. How I felt right now, it didn't matter. You can fix all of these things later. They're the things I told myself because they were the only things that made me feel better. After high school, things changed, but I didn't. Making friends was still hard. Connecting to people was even harder. And the biggest fights and fleas didn't seem to come from my degree, but rather from letting people in. But it was okay, because I had heard the word potential enough times to know that I had some. So all I had to do was keep on going until all of a sudden all of that made sense, right? I was living in this weird contradiction because on the outside everything made sense. On the inside, I was completely and utterly empty. It's not that I was broken, so it wouldn't be a problem, right? And through all of these thoughts and this anxiety and all these fears that came in my head, this one lingering question just never seemed to leave my head. If I'm not who I used to be, and I'm still not who I needed to be, then who the hell am I right now? That question didn't have an answer. Not yet, at least. But I didn't realize at the time that what I needed to focus on was the question itself rather than the answer. Let me ask you this right now today. When is the last time any one of you have questioned the labels that you hold onto yourself? And I'm not talking about the simple things of, oh, he's just quiet, she's just mature, that one is just gifted. I'm talking about these deep internal beliefs that we ingrain on ourselves so much to the point that that's all we really understand about ourselves. You may consider, and I already hear you saying it right now that, oh, no, it's not that deep. This is just who I am. And I hear you. Trust me, I hear you. But what I'm trying to get at is the point that these internal thoughts are a lot more than just labels. They have consequences. That internal thought that tells you that, no, you're just quiet, you don't really have to be out there. Is that who you really are? Or have you been hurt so much by your past that you don't bother to try anymore? That voice that tells you that you don't need to speak up, there's nothing to do with that. Is that true? Or have you spoken so much and felt so dismissed that it hurts too much to even bother? That voice that tells you that you have to be the best, there is no second option. Is that courageous? Or does part of you still believe that love is conditional? You see, when we start to look at these voices and question the labels that we attach to ourselves, we start to see their intention. They were never trying to hold you back. They were just trying to keep you safe, the only way they knew how to. So, you might ask, what's the point of any of this? So what if it's just a voice, a label, a voice, a thought, anything you can put to it? What's the whole point? When you start to question these labels you have for yourself, you do two things. First off, you realize that you can no longer set those limitations on yourself anymore. And secondly, you get to make a choice. You have a choice to show up any way you want to. And there's no requirement for it to be set back on everything that has been given in your past or any expectation that has been set on you for the future. Everything that you know now and everything that you understand about yourself now is simply that, an understanding. Nothing that has a basis of fact, but something that can give you the potential to pivot forward from that point. In my final year of varsity, I made the biggest decision of my life to apply for the Student Representative Council for the biggest higher education institute in the whole of South Africa. Surprisingly to me, I ended up being chosen for the position. And you'd think, oh, that's great, that's amazing. But 3 months into my semester, I made the unanimous decision to resign from my position. Not because anyone told me to, not because anything bad happened, no, nothing like that. I had become my own worst narrator. I had convinced myself so much to the point that this wasn't something for me, that I would not be capable, that I would not be possible, it would not be possible, that I decided to take control for myself and not let failure even be an option. Sometimes we are our own worst enemy. We rather convince ourselves that there is no point to even try, that these hurdles are too big for ourselves, because we rather not deal with the possibility of failure. And that is one of the most damaging things we can ever do to ourselves. And you may still be thinking, okay, cool, you hear the story, there's an understanding, we can question our own labels, we can show up if we want to. Now what? So what? What can I do about it? What should we do about it? I've spoken parts of my story for the past few years to many other people around me, usually to my friends, usually to my family, and the biggest thing that I've seen is that I've never been alone. The person sitting next to you is just as scared as not being enough as you are. And I think we should take time to consider that we shouldn't hold ourselves back like that anymore. There's never been, and there never has been, a need for you to be perfect. When is the last time you've let yourself breathe? When is the last time You've had the understanding that you hold all of these fears, all of these shames, all of these doubts about yourself and whether or not you're capable to truly achieve. When's the last time you've understood that and you've simply let it go? There has never been a need for you to be perfect. And it's when we truly understand that we give ourselves the capacity to simply be. Because sometimes the kindest thing we can ever do to ourselves is to not keep moving forward and push through everything that we think we know, but to simply drop the act. So, oddly enough, we find ourselves back right where we started. Just me and you in that empty space, with that lingering question still in the air. Who are you? But now, maybe it doesn't sound like pressure. Maybe it sounds like potential. Because the journey to self-discovery doesn't start the moment you figure yourself out. It starts the moment you've realized that you've been where you've needed to be, right here, all along. Let's not have fear be the foundation for our future. Let's not live in our own self-doubts. Let's not affirm everything that we've been told about ourselves, but rather simply give ourselves the courage to truly figure out who we really are. Thank you.